Good afternoon and welcome to another ICB TV. It's Wednesday, the 8th of July, 3 o'clock. Thank you all for joining us. We've got quite an interesting day in today. We were to have Richard Sims from FA Sims. He's tied up with something else. So we've got even better than that. We've got his associate director with us today, Steve Thatcher. And the reason I say that is Steve is an insolvency lawyer, and he's got quite a bit of experience, quite a broad experience, including quite a bit in the license trade. And I do mean as an owner, not as a partaker. Steve, good afternoon. How are you?
Good afternoon. I'm very well, thank you. Interesting day, as you say.
Yeah. Before we go on to all the various bits of money that have been thrown at us a bit today, tell us just a bit about you first. I did allude to your sort of, can I call it a checkered past? But
yeah, it's a varied history. 25 years as a solicitor, some in private practice and others on my own. I spent a good 7 or 8 years helping to clear up the Irish debt issue and bringing Irish people to the UK, where we wrote off €3 billion in Irish debt via our bankruptcy system. That came to an end, and I decided I would like to scratch an itch and run some real ale pubs. Real ale being my tipple of choice outside of the office. And that was a very interesting experience, building a brand and understanding how difficult it is for that sector to make a living. And that's resulted in a number of articles in various publications over the last 3 months, just steering and wondering where that sector is going to go as lockdown has now been lifted and businesses start tentatively dipping their toe back in the water. So a very interesting sector at present.
yeah, and in our brief chat beforehand, I described insolvency very much as the elephant in the room. It seems to be one of those things which people don't like to discuss, and they wait probably a little bit too late in the cycle to be able to get full advantage from an insolvency practitioner. But one of the things that I've learned from Richard over the years is that an insolvency practitioner is not the person you call in when all else fails and helps you close it down. If you get them in early enough, it's about restructuring, and you may end up closing down, but you might have alternatives. I mean, is there an ideal time to talk to a practitioner?
Yeah, it's interesting you did that. A few years ago, I wrote the world's first personal guarantee insurance. That's where a director could take out an insurance to indemnify himself when his limited company was failing. And I wrote it really because there never seemed to be a driver to force a director to take advice when they first encountered an issue in their company. So the insurance was structured in such a way that where you had debts that you couldn't pay, or somebody couldn't pay you and it destabilized the business, or you had a judgment, that you would come and take advice from a practitioner at that stage. And the insurance acted as a driver to take advice. And I think those type of elements still exist, that if we could get across to directors that there is no shame or harm in calling up and getting advice as soon as you have a significant bad debt, or as soon as you have a PAYE or an HMRC issue that you can't deal with, they're the times to take advice. Before 9 months down the line, they become insurmountable problems. Catch them on day one.
And I mean, most people that find themselves in this sort of situation, the first people they come across, of course, are the accountants. Obviously, they're bookkeepers, but the accountants then tend to look at this. And I've listening to a number of businesses, and I do a lot of talks to small businesses, and I come across this a lot. I don't think the accountants know when to bring you in either. So the accountant sort of moves along, describing the water as the boat is sinking, without telling them, actually, you need to get somebody in to start plugging it now. What do you do as a profession to try and persuade the advisors to help their clients rather than, again, use you as a last resort?
It is a very difficult conversation to have. With an accountant, often the only time that the accountant will see their client, unless they're producing monthlies for them or monthly cash flows, is the end of the year. And that is a snapshot of a position that is already 9 months or more past its best date. And of course, we all know, we've all spoken to a myriad of directors who everything is rosy. You know, that you come and sit down in front of your advisor, how things go, things are going great. Your director in front of your accountant or your bookkeeper will never say, do you know what, I'm having a really terrible time and I don't know whether you can help me. Whether that's because they suddenly are cognizant that there is a bill to pay with whichever professional they're sat in front of at the time, I don't know. But it's very difficult for all of us, it seems to me, to be able to get directors to engage in that moment and understand where they are.
Yeah, I mean, one described it to me once as it's like trying to speak to somebody and the first thing you have to tell them is that your kids are ugly. You know, it's not something anybody really wants to discuss, you know, and it does get very difficult. You mentioned obviously there the accountants, and we have this, obviously we're bookkeepers and we work with one, but there's very much an us and them. And bookkeepers are different in as much as they do have a hands-on, day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month relationship. And in many ways, as I've discussed with Richard and others in the past, we ought to be the first port of call because we're going to see it first.
Yeah.
For exactly that reason, that, you know, whatever, you can paper over a lot for 9 months after the year end before realizing that, you know, everything's hit the fan already. How do bookkeepers get to understand what it is they should be looking for and basically when to ring you up?
Well, it's the pinch points in cash, isn't it? It's where we are on our creditor ledger. How far are we stretching terms? Are we buffering the overdraft at the bank month after month after month? Also, on the flip side, are our debtors struggling to pay us? Is that going to cause us a knock-on cash flow issue ourselves in a couple of months' time? So, you know, these are real-time events that can be seen. Now, in month one, it may just ring a little bit of a bell in the back of the mind. But if you're starting to see that in month two, stretching into month three, then it's a conversation that needs to be had with the director for a number of reasons. Because the director himself may be, and we've always heard of this, brilliant at making widgets, but absolutely no good at getting paid for making the widgets he's making. And they're so focused on their day job, which is getting product out the door, that a lot of the time they forget you've got to get the money back in and then you've got to be able to pay the bills. And somebody in your position is ideal just to put a hand on the shoulder and say, look, your widgets are brilliant, but actually you're not making any money on them. And it's time that, you know, we had a conversation, A, about your pricing, or B, about your debt collection, or C, about your overheads. Because in 9 months' time, you're either going to be having to dig your hand in your own pocket, or God forbid, you're not even going to be here. So, yeah, difficult conversations to have. But actually, and I often find this, is once that conversation is out in the open, a director will turn around and say, do you know what, I was wondering, and I'm glad you've mentioned it, and golly, yeah, where do we go from here? And helping someone cross that threshold is not as difficult once you get there, once you have those initial conversations as you might think.
I was talking to somebody recently who said actually bookkeepers could be a problem. And I said, why is that? He said, well, the thing is, you guys are so good at coping with helping businesses out. You almost extend their life that a couple of months because you get a bit more money in for them, and you help them with their books, and you help them with their cash flow projections. You help them go to the bank for a bit more money. And we've got to be very realistic as bookkeepers. I mean, it is. But I think one of the things we have got to do is give our bookkeepers the confidence to be able to have that conversation. Because I think the concern for most bookkeepers is that when you go to your client and say, look, things really aren't going very well, they're going to be insulted. And there's a way to say that. And we can't just ring up and say, oh, by the way, you ought to speak to this man. He'll talk to you what it's all about. You know, we can't do that. And
no.
I think there is a confidence thing. I mean, do you find when you go into businesses that they get a bit offended that they've had to call you?
Not offended. What I do find, and case in point today, or case in point yesterday, I had a conversation with a lady, and they've been running their business for 22 years. And it took her 3 weeks to pick up the phone to take advice. And when I just said to her, you know, the hardest thing you have done this month is to pick up the phone and take advice, she goes, oh yeah. And I said, but we've got a solution now, haven't we? You know, the problem can be relieved. You don't have to worry about it anymore. It now becomes my problem. And she suddenly said, oh, that's magnificent. Do you know what? Just having someone to talk to. But girding your loins and saying, right, I'm going to make that call. And having taken 3 weeks to do so, it is the hardest thing some people do. And if we as professionals can help people overcome that reticence, but by making it a conversation that is not difficult to have, then I think that will help us. One tip, perhaps, is to remind the company director that whilst they may operate their business from a limited company shell called XYZ Limited, the business isn't the limited company shell. It's the people they employ, it's themselves, it's their ideas, it's what they do every month. The limited company shell is just a place in which that business is housed. And if that limited company shell doesn't exist because it's got unsustainable debts, it doesn't mean that business can't operate in another limited company shell with the same employees doing the same thing, but in a space where it doesn't carry the debt that makes it unsustainable going forward.
So it's a bit like getting the flotilla of boats to go and rescue the soldiers, retreat, get yourself
Fight
together.
another day, absolutely. Yeah. Yes, the Dunkirk metaphor, absolutely right. Take them off the beaches, give them a chance to fight another day.
Great. One of the interesting things was finding that you have got a background where you've actually been a small business person yourself, so you know how it feels. I think one of the problems that I've always found with people is in the legal profession is that they have become legal professionals straight out of university, straight out of college or whatever. And actually, it becomes a process for them. And I think nobody sees their small business as just a process. And that, I think that is something that offends them. And they need somebody who can say, well, actually, yeah, but you could do this, you could do that. Not, okay, well, this is how you go bankrupt.
And that is entirely right. The fact that, you know, for a lot of advisors, all they've ever known is what they read in a textbook. Whereas if you've stood behind the bar for 16 hours a day, pulling the pints whilst your feet are aching, your back is killing you, and you're wondering how you're going to pay the rent at the end of the month, but still having to maintain that smile on your face as the next drunk wanders through the door. You know, that's an experience that many people pay hundreds of thousands of pounds for. And in fact, I did as well. And being able to share that experience with somebody and to say to them, look, I know what it's like. I have walked in your shoes, and actually there is light at the end of the tunnel and we can get through this together. It is an amazing thing. And since we have been in lockdown, and Richard and I have almost set up this hospitality division, the ability to have conversations with dozens and dozens of landlords and restaurant proprietors and say, look, I've done that. I've been there with you. And there is light. You can get through this. It's been very rewarding for both us and those we've advised. Yeah,
I was listening to the Chancellor's statement at lunchtime today, and he was saying that the British economy dropped by 25% last year, which is more than it has grown over the last 25 years. So it is a huge shock that is going to hit us, or is hitting us at the moment. I think it's like the ripples are going to keep coming and coming and coming. And there will be some big decisions to make. And the entertainment industry, the restaurants, pubs, etc., they are really feeling this. Now, how do you think we're going to see an end to this? Is everything that's being thrown out by the government going to help at all? Are we going to see fewer pubs and clubs? What?
I certainly think that we will see fewer what we term as traditional classic boozers. Your end of terrace boozer, which is already struggling somewhat anyway. When you consider that most licensed premises survive on the trade that they get on a Friday and the Saturday night, and that's when they are full. If we cast forward maybe 6 months with the reticence that people will still have for going out into crowds, then and albeit slightly smaller social distancing requirements, you can see that pubs and restaurants are going to struggle for the foreseeable future. Now, the business model may change, and we've seen a rise in micro pubs and micro breweries over the last 10 years or so, and that may be a trend, that smaller drinking space with, in many cases, no rates and a very small rent, almost American ma and pop type businesses where they are lifestyle businesses. That may be where the trend in drinking goes. It's been interesting today with the announcement that the Chancellor has made, especially with an effort to kickstart restaurants, whereby in October, I think we're going to see, if you register, up to half of a £20 bill per person will be refunded to you. Now, that's for food and soft drinks. And I think the brilliant element of that scheme is it realises that if people go out, they generally go out on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, or a Sunday lunch. So where this is aimed is almost at recalibrating society's way of engaging with the restaurant trade, to say, actually, there are 3 other days of the week. There's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And so restaurant spaces need to be filled during those times. And if we can get people to get into the habit of going out Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, not just Thursday, Friday, Saturday, then the reduced space in a restaurant can be spread over the rest of the week, and that will give them a decent chance of being here in 6 or 9 months' time, when either there's a vaccine or we've got sufficient herd immunity for it not to be such an issue. I think that was certainly for August as a way of kick-starting that element of the economy and trying to change some processes. I think that was a good move.
Yeah, it looks interesting. For those of you who haven't listened to the announcement at lunchtime, as Steve was just saying, it's trying to encourage people back into restaurants, but 50% off up to £10 a head. It is soft drinks, as I think you say, not
alcohol.
I think that's to try and stop the pubs claiming everybody's bought a pasty at 26 pints or something. That's easy going. And I wasn't quite sure. I presume it will include pubs that feed as well. Is it just restaurants, or it will be gastropubs, etc.?
Absolutely. Anywhere that does food, it seems to me, you have to register. Again, the devil will be in the detail, and we've only just got the broad brush. But it does seem to me that food and soft drinks are up to £10 a head. You can reclaim 50% back. So it'll be interesting to see the take-up of that. And then alongside that, we've also got the reduction in VAT for those establishments as well, and accommodation and attractions. So that drops the VAT rate for 9 months, I think it might be. Till January. Yeah, 12th of January.
5%.
Yeah.
So that's going to be interesting for all the bookkeepers. They're going to have to be careful how they work with that one. But yeah, that coming down to 5%. Yeah, hopefully that will make a difference. On a £100 bill, just to make it easy. Obviously, that means you're going to knock £15 off the top. So yeah, I think that's going to have a bonus. The other thing is that one of the big concerns I think government has had is that people have become reliant upon the furlough payment, and it's kept people going for a little while. But has anybody really considered whether at the end of the furlough there is going to be enough work out there to keep them on? So I think they're trying to cover that. They're going to actually pay people to bring a person out of furlough. It's a very difficult position to be in, obviously. And we had Paul Scully, the small business minister, on Monday, and we were talking to him about the devil in the deep blue sea. Really, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. And the Chancellor alluded to this today. He said, if I tell you the furlough is going to end in October, everyone's say it should be November. If I say it's November, you're going to say it should have been December. So he's decided it's end of October. So that's done. But companies that bring a person back off furlough will get £1,000 ahead. So that in itself is a help. I mean, it's not going to presumably turn a business round completely, but it will be a help. And then there's a big boost also for apprenticeships, for people long-term unemployed to be brought back into work. If you take a young person on, they'll pay the salary for the first 6 months. There's a lot going on. We're all trying to be very positive, but looking at this in real terms, is this papering over the cracks, or do you think for some it will be the incentive that they need just to make that final step? So yeah, I'm going to make this work again.
I think my take from this, and it's purely personal, it is that the Chancellor is trying to steer us. He can't, that there isn't this unending pot of money. At some point, this 190 billion that this is costing so far is going to have to be repaid. Now, there may be a structure for that. Maybe it's repayable over 100 years, and actually you just park in and pay some interest, like a war debt.
Yeah.
But I just saw a figure, furloughing itself, it has covered 9.3 million people at a cost of £80 billion. And it can't go on forever. Now, by signalling as he did, even 6 or 8 weeks ago, this is coming to an end, it's given businesses a chance to look at themselves, sit down and look at their cash flow, and dig deep into their business. I mean, Richard here talks about having a kitchen table that you set out in front of you, and you package up the various elements of your business, and do I want to keep this, and can I keep that? And forcing businesses to say, well, when the scheme comes to an end in a few months, do I need 8 staff, or can I have 5? And so if the business has made the decision that it actually only needs 5, the Chancellor is saying, well, you may be letting 3 people go, but actually if you could keep them on and pay them at least £520 a month for the next 3 months, November, December, January, there is £1,000 that you can have back for each of those employees. And then have a look in January, and maybe the business has turned around. So rather than let those 3 people go, keep them, build them into your cash flow, and then at the end of that month, you get £1,000 back again. And actually, maybe it would have been the right thing to do to keep them on, because in January, maybe the business is on a different footing. Maybe we can go at you're glad you hadn't got rid of them. So it's giving a bit of breathing space. It's not everything. It couldn't be everything. But it is something.
Yeah, and I think also they're trying to guard against this knee-jerk quick reaction that many people have had at different stages during this. And I mean, it's fully understandable. But we had a small number of our members, I'm thankful to say only a small number of our members, who on day 1 of lockdown rang in and said, I can't pay my subscriptions, I want to give up my membership. We chatted to them and had a talk with them. Actually, I think all but one have come back, because they've said, it wasn't quite what I'd expected. In fact, I am in big demand, so I am going to get, my business is going to be required. I thought I was just going to lose all my customers, but actually, they need help with this part of the recovery. And we've all got our fingers crossed they're going to need the same amount of help differently, perhaps, but for the next part of the recovery. And as the Chancellor said today, this is only the 3rd part of the recovery. There are other bits to come yet.
Yeah.
So I think we have to sit down and look at our own businesses as well and say, right, how is this going? And what can we do? But yeah, I think there are a number of things happening on that. I mean,
well, it's all about getting used to the new normal, isn't it? Now, just take our business here, for example. What Rich and I and the other elements of the management team have done is say, do we actually need this huge office space for our staff? Because we were all sent home day 1. We had seen this coming. We went to voice over telephony. Everyone was given a laptop so that we could work through a portal. And now actually, generally, we're in 1 day a week each. And therefore, we need a quarter of the space. So we're re-engineering our business. And I think one of the things that your organisation could be instrumental in is getting a business to look at itself like that and say, do you need everything that you spend money on? Is there another way to do this? do you need to do your postage the way it's done? Can that go online? Do you need your office space? Can your workforce work from home? And these are inputs, valuable inputs that you could have.
Yes, I think we do, and we are stressing that to our members. And I think the thing about a bookkeeper is because they get very involved with the businesses, they are advisors in a slightly broader term. They're there basically because people need some books done. And, I've said so many times, people are getting fed up with what I'm saying by now, but really the only people that go into business so they can look after a set of books are either accountants or bookkeepers. Nobody else does. And most of the clients that we have a glazed look when we give them the figures anyway. And so what we're trying to do now as a bookkeeping organisation is say to our members that's giving them the figures is the start. You then need to explain it so that they know what's happening. Because most of them, and I'm the same myself, I have to say, I glaze over a bit when our FD comes to me with reams and reams of figures. I always look at the last page and the bottom line. Yeah. And if that's okay, I don't take any notice about what's going on, and I should do. And I think explaining that to small businesses, this is looking great, but this is what might happen in the next 3 months if you carry on as you are. And we need to build more into cash flow as being, one of the leading parts of what a bookkeeper provides. They've got to be working with businesses to show them trends, ups, downs, etc., so that if they've got a bit of money in the bank, they don't go and buy another BMW or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we're in rocky times, and rocky times may go on. And if you're a bookkeeper for a small business which is very reliant on one customer or two customers, then you've got to be brave enough to stand up and say, did you know all your eggs are in one basket here? Or have you thought about diversifying? Did you know that Garry last month, instead of paying on his usual 14 days, stretched it to 21 or 28 or 36? That's a conversation that needs to be thought about. And we alluded back to where we were started earlier in what your organisation can do. And I think absolutely sit on the right hand shoulder of your business and say, look at these trends.
Yeah, and we also get lots of information coming at us as to what bookkeepers should be doing and what small businesses should be doing. And if social media has done anything, unfortunately, it's given us an army of so-called gurus. There's a guru for everything nowadays, and all they seem to do is take up social media space and then want to be charged for telling you what you already knew, rather than using what I call proper experts like yourselves, whoever. But you can get so much out of these people, and I find that it annoys me personally that there are so many of them about. But if some people need that shoulder, then perhaps it is necessary. But I think, our members have really got to understand how important they are to all this, and that is a message we try very hard to get across. I think most of them get it. I think most of them see themselves as very important, and if anything, COVID has helped, because those clients who perhaps weren't very quick to answer calls and didn't send them the receipts in or whatever it was, have suddenly needed them immediately, and they've needed help, and they've needed that form filled in by Friday, or they don't get to eat tonight. And that has really solidified, it's focused the mind a little, shall I put it that way?
Yeah, of everybody, absolutely. Yeah, it's got everyone to reevaluate that relationship and understand that it is deeper and more entrenched than maybe it seemed at the beginning.
Yeah. So when you come across a business that you've been called in to see, let's say one of our bookkeepers calls you in to see a business, and you presumably start with the books.
I don't actually. What I start with is a general understanding of what the director wants, where they see themselves, where they want to go. Because if I get a steer that a director desperately wants to carry on with the business, that is a different conversation to one that's just had enough and doesn't want to do anything anymore, because it then sets a conversation as to what there is in the business, how we can extract that out for the director at the very best cost for him, and how he structures himself going forward, rather than just a fire sale of the assets, pay off the creditors and just close the thing down. So it's always the director's preference for what he wants to do next that I start a conversation with.
And are they normally right, or do you persuade them they've got the wrong idea, or do you just go with it?
No, I think a director, by the time they've taken the time and the courage to put a call through, will understand whether or not they are still in love with what they do. It comes back to my point earlier when I said that a business is more than just a limited company shell that it's housed in. It is the director and the staff and the ideas and the product. If the director still has that energy and that desire to build that product and to build a new business, then we'll run with them. Absolutely.
Now, what happens when we've got a client who, for whatever reason, can't continue to run the business? Say they are taken ill, they want to hand it on to their son, and their son decides not to bother, or something like this. And are you called in to help run that business down, or end that business, or perhaps even make it look good for a sale and move on from that?
We can do, absolutely. I apologise if you could see stuff coming all over my screen. It's the problem from working from home. Yeah, we can do all of those things or none of those things. If there is a business that's going through a transition, we can come in early doors without any desire to take it through a process, and we can help manage a change. It almost takes me back to 20 years ago when nobody wanted to call themselves an insolvency practice. If you remember, everybody was into restructuring.
Yes.
Back in the year 2000s. No one quite knew, again, what restructuring was or how to force somebody to come to you to take restructuring advice. But in simple terms, it's just a re-engineering of where a business is to get it to recalibrate itself. Does it need 3 premises, or can it operate from 2? Does it need the unit that it's in? Is there superfluous machinery lying all over the place? Do we need to downsize? Do we just need a little bit of outside investment, a little bit of money, and to stop us getting into an overtrading situation? So there are a myriad of skills that we can bring to a table.
One of the concerns that I've heard a number of mainly landlords voicing is that a lot of businesses will now decide they can work from home. So we've got a 10-year lease on this property. It's far too big. They're trying to negotiate half, reducing their fee by 50%.
Yeah.
Or something. If that doesn't work, well, we'll just close down the business and start again from home.
Yeah.
Where does the moral judgment come from you if they come to you and say, I need to get out of my lease, I want to close everything down and start again from scratch?
I think I remind you that I spent 25 years as a lawyer. I have no moral compass.
Oh, I'm not trying to understand that. But,
it's an interesting one, isn't it? Asking a lawyer about morality. At the end of the day, everybody is in business for themselves, and you do the best for yourself. The nature of the way that we operate and are going to operate has changed immeasurably. Just have a look at our high streets and how they have changed and dwindled over time. And lots of high streets are held by pension funds, and I guess that's held by us. That means it's held by us as well. But I don't think we should be afraid of change. I think we should embrace it. And actually, if a business requires a smaller premises, then so be it. Those advising landlords will be advising landlords on the changes they need to make. Instead of having big sheds, have smaller units. Break up that space. Is that space now not for an office? Is it for social housing? So I think we all have to look after ourselves and trust that others will look after other people.
I read I've forgotten which company it was, but I think it was Debenhams in one of the big shopping centres. I don't know which one it was, but the owners of the centre had converted that to hot desks for people to work from rather than retail. And they were apparently filling those up very, very quickly because a lot of people now needed a smaller unit, so they were going in to use that. And I think that's it's the resilience that we have, I think, as business people. We do try and come up with something different. So I think that was great. I've actually got a couple of questions in at the moment. Let's have a look. Heather Palmer, if your client is already in a large amount of debt, they will be reluctant to incur more costs by engaging an insolvency practitioner. How do we get around this? I'm an ICB bookkeeper, but also a licensed accountant. There isn't always an us and them, Gary. Oh, sorry, that one's having a dig at me for talking about accountants. I do apologise. Ella, yeah, no, look, I appreciate that, but I run a bookkeeping institute. I'm looking after my members, so yeah, I know what accountants do often do a good job, but anyway, so where does that come? How do we pay
for Heather? I mean, the fact that a business is insolvent in that it can't pay its debts as and when they fall due, or its assets are less than its liabilities, the two classic tests of insolvency. Generally, in a business somewhere, there will be enough assets to pay a liquidator to close the business down. There'll be something in there somewhere, and we're not talking fortunes either. We can take a business through an insolvency process for as little as £3,000 plus VAT. Now, if a business really hasn't got £3,500 plus VAT, and the director hasn't got that amount of money to wind up a business, then it is possible for a strike-off to take place. But that does need to be done properly. It's not just as simply a case of filing your DSO1 and sitting back and waiting for Companies House to strike it off. You need to go through a proper procedure. But for as little as a couple of £150, if a company really hasn't got the assets to take a liquidation through properly, then a strike-off is a cost-effective alternative if done properly.
So if a company lets itself disappear, closes down, it hasn't got an insolvency practitioner, etc., is that the end of it? Is it too late, or can you go back in and say...
if the company has been compulsorily struck off, then that isn't necessarily the end of it, because then any creditor can ask for it to be restored to the register and then pursue the director personally for those losses. So it's always preferable to go through a formal process to close the company down. That way that there's no comeback on you personally for the liability as a director, and you can sleep at night doing so. Again, for a lot of directors, they will weigh up how much liability they've got and the likelihood of anybody wasting time and money to restore something to a register. And I guess it comes down to a director's element of risk at the end of the day. Yeah.
And is it still the case that limited liability is exactly that, or providing the director can be seen to have done their best, is that still good enough nowadays? Or
absolutely, all things being equal, and assuming that a director has acted properly throughout his tenure, limited liability absolutely is still everything that it professed to be. Of course, when we do take a business through an insolvency process, we all start by saying to the director, look, we are obliged to look at antecedent transactions. We would like you to disclose whether or not you have an overdrawn director's loan account. There is a report that goes into the Secretary of State or the Insolvency Service on your conduct as a director, but assuming that you haven't done anything wrong, it doesn't appear on your personal credit file, and you are actually obligated as a director to take steps to cease to trade and to wind up your company. So everything points to a director taking responsibility and winding up a company if it is right to do so.
Right. Now, we've all seen large insolvency companies and accounts becoming the directors of football companies, for example, football clubs. And they've traded on for a while and then tried to sell off the family silver if they can. I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, football clubs are an interesting beast, aren't they? For a start, and I've never done one of these, I was once involved on the sale of Notts County. It's been sold so many times that it beggars belief. But football creditors are in an insolvency are guaranteed to be paid. That's one of the things. It always amazes me how insolvency practitioners decide that they want to be involved in a football club, because it does seem to me that the vast majority of clubs outside of the Premiership are basket cases. I would love to know the stats on the number of football clubs that actually still own their own ground and the share of the Football League, or whether or not all those have been split and held by different and separate entities. How an insolvency practitioner guarantees they get paid for doing a job? Well, I guess they're probably taking directors' guarantees. It would be a brave man to take on a football club and the leases that go with it without all of that being underwritten, unless you're doing it just for the prestige of being involved, for instance, in the CVA of Bury FC.
Ali Wiltshire said, we do management accounts after the bookkeeping and have the conversation with an in-depth about the monthly comparisons. I mean, great, Ali, that's exactly what you're supposed to do as bookkeepers. That's what we want there. I've just had one in here. Do we, if we see that one of our clients is struggling and the client continually dips into his back pocket and puts his own money in, is it something that we should be saying to them, look, this is wasting your money and you should be looking at this differently?
Absolutely. Again, that alludes to the point that the director is wedded to the name of the limited company, which there may be reason for that. But ultimately, the business that he is investing in, the business that he is propping up with his own money, can be done in a debt-free shell. So that £10,000 that he's going to stick in may be spent better as seed capital for a new business with no liabilities, rather than being poured into a black hole for a business that can't pay its current VAT, let alone its outstandings.
And in your experience, when a company goes into liquidation, do the suppliers get much back? Anything back? Nothing back?
Again, it will depend on the extent of the losses over a period of time and the assets available to creditors. With a lot of SME businesses, zero chance of a dividend. By the time the costs of a liquidation are taken into account, and the director is scrabbled around just to find the statement of affairs fee, very little, if nothing at all, left in a business even to do all the post-liquidation work, which we're obliged to do. And so the chances of small creditors getting anything back from a typical liquidation are nil. So
if we look at, well, if we ignore COVID for a moment, if we can do that, and just talk about pre-COVID, I mean, has insolvency changed dramatically over the years, or is it same old, same old?
It has changed, actually. The industry has had to clean up. It's cleaned itself up. The days of Section 98 meetings where all the lads got together for a pint and a fag and to decide who was burying which company and for a bit of a jolly, and then maybe distributing or selling some assets, in the pub later, they've all gone. It's a hugely regulated business, quite rightly so. It puts incredible burdens on those still involved in it, and the rewards are a fraction of what they used to be. But it is a necessary industry, one that I'm proud to be involved in, but nevertheless, very regulated, very tight margins. Woe is me, as I say, woe is me.
I mentioned earlier before we came on air that FA Sims have exhibited at our conference a couple of times, I believe. And, that Richard and one of his assistants have stood behind the table full of leaflets and information, etc. And the stands on either side and around him have been absolutely full of people. And he's been sitting there like, the relative that nobody really wants to talk to. How do we encourage our members to have a conversation actually before they need to speak to you? How do we do that? Or is it a case of they come to you just when they can go nowhere else?
Garry, if we knew the answer to that, we would be sunning ourselves, wouldn't we, in the Bahamas rather than doing this webinar. It is the great conundrum. It is how, and the industry has struggled with this forever, how to get businesses and their advisors to engage with us 9 months before the event that takes them down. And I guess it's webinars like this where we just keep hammering the message that it's good to talk. It's fine. A conversation with us that leads nowhere will cost nothing, but that conversation may save a director from sticking another 20, 30 or 40,000 pounds in a business that is doomed to fail.
Yeah. We, at the risk of upsetting Heather even further, because I'm not trying to hit at accountants, but I mentioned on air a little while ago about a bookkeeper who had sort of thought that perhaps the client wasn't doing quite as well as perhaps they should be doing, and she was a bit concerned. So the books at the end of the year were handed over to an accountant. That period was some way away, so she rang up the accountant and gave him her fears. And could you perhaps just give him a call, you know, and have a chat, sort of out of the blue. And the accountant didn't ring, but he put his insolvency office directly in touch with them. And that really is sort of a sledgehammer to crack a walnut, I think. And it's a shame, but I think what we could really do with is organisations like yours. I'm very happy to take some stuff from FSMs. We need to take more materials from you that we can carry in our newsletter and things, so that our members can understand a bit better of how you approach things and get to understand who you are and what you are.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you're going to have a friend in the insolvency profession, it should at least be, you know, it could at least be FA Sims, and it's a family-run business. Richard's father set it up, I think, didn't he?
He did, absolutely. Yeah, I think part of the issue is that everyone sees insolvency as the end of something, whereas I would like to have a conversation with us as a way to restructure and renew, rather than the end of something, the beginning of something else. And if we could all take something away from this and bear in mind that a conversation with us isn't the end of something, but the beginning of another process, the beginning of another life, then you know, we've at least moved something on. And
does HMRC still get first bite of the cake if it happens?
No, they're not preferential. There were suggestions that they would start to enjoy their preferential status again in October, but that's been knocked back. So there's no preferential status for HMRC.
Yeah, I remember seeing the bit that said they were hoping to get that back, but so that was dropped.
Yeah, they've decided. HMRC have actually been very good through this whole process with the deferment of VAT. They seem to have stepped up to the plate, and I don't think they're being as aggressive in their collection processes as they were before either. But certainly no preferential status at the moment for HMRC. Whether it'll come back in March, April again next year for that first slice, we will see.
Yeah, I think HMRC have become quite good friends to most of our bookkeeping members. And in fact, I think for 4 out of the last 5 years, they have been, they've won we have a set of awards every year, the Lucre Award. And they've won the Lucre Award for the best advisors. So I think if you use, probably not the right word, but if you communicate then with HMRC at the appropriate time and in the proper manner, then you know you can work with HMRC to do a lot of stuff before it gets too silly. And Margot Clark, what's the best way and the best time to broach the subject of talking to an insolvency practitioner?
I don't know if there is a good or bad time. It's when you feel comfortable with it. I would always encourage the earliest engagement, because it may just be that we have a conversation with somebody and it's a case of, okay, well, we can just monitor the situation. Yes, you might be, you know, bouncing your overdraft a little bit at the moment, but having a look down the line, you've got a good panel of work coming in. And so we do nothing for a couple of months and then revisit it again. And it may just be that a look over something and a conversation and an understanding of where the business wants to be results in nothing more than you'll be fine, off we go. But at least that conversation's been had. Or it may be that an intervention from us and a conversation with creditors will buy time to pay. And that may be enough to get a business through a tricky patch. It doesn't always have to be a result or end an insolvency process.
So if you think that the business is worth saving, do you go to banks with the clients or with the bookkeeper and say, we can turn this round, we do this?
Absolutely. We've got a panel of people we work with, solicitors, accountants and financiers, all experts in what they do. If there is a genuine need in a business for something, we will put a team together and handhold the business through that process. Yeah, renewal, restart, in whatever guise it might be.
And do you find, I'm just thinking as a bank manager, I'm sitting there and through the door comes either an accountant or an insolvency practitioner. Do you think it has a different effect on the outcome, or do they think it's being properly managed if you've got hold of it, or what?
Well, first of all, if you've managed to sit in front of a bank manager, you're doing better than most of us.
All right. Yeah. I take your point.
Yeah.
I'm of the generation that still remember a bank manager. I seem to remember mine once upon a time. Yeah.
As opposed to the 21-year-old straight out of university with no experience, and the computer says no. Yeah, I think if you can get to speak to somebody, a relationship manager, and you have your facts and figures and your reasons for that, you're going to get a better reception than perhaps making an online application for 15 different places where you've left your footprint. The horses for courses, but engaging a professional when you're serious about what you want to do would be a better route than blanketly sending off applications for finance all over the place.
I set my first business up years ago. I just left school, and I did artwork and advertising agency stuff for clients, and part of my business had to rely upon people waiting for longer than 30 days for me to pay them, because I do everything in advance. Then I've got the payment, and then I paid them. Do you find that structure can still be worked nowadays, or is everybody expecting 30 days, or at least, making you pay interest if you don't?
Well, of course, we've got the late payment legislation that does enable businesses to bring action and seek punitive interest in terms of late payment. I think, again, it comes down to having conversations. If those you are working with understand how your business works and the timescales on which you work by, and that they're prepared to engage with you on that basis, and on doing so, you make sure that you adhere to those terms every month, then I don't think anyone can complain about it. What people hate the most is being told one thing and that not being stuck to. There is nothing more that irritates a business than being lied to, especially with regard to payments, because invariably they have made their own promises based upon what you say to them. And so that chain concertinas down the line, doesn't it? So always under promise, over deliver.
So who is it that normally approaches you when there's a problem? Is it an advisor or is it the business direct?
Well, we're hugely well connected due to the work that Richard's father and Richard have done over the last year. So actually it's a myriad. We have some very well performing websites, so we get inquiries directly from those. But also with organisations like yourselves, we do get an awful lot of advisor-led inquiries. And they are brilliant because they come in warm, and there is already an expectation from those being led in that the service they're going to be given will be first rate, because everyone's put their reputation on the line in making that connection. So we get an awful lot of advisor-led inquiries, and we make sure that you know, they're prioritized as well. So there is very good follow-up, very good feedback. We always keep our advisors in the loop if required.
We've had a number of cases recently where people have used the bookkeeper or an accountant that is actually unqualified. Things have gone wrong, and when it's got to court, the judges have basically blamed the business person for not realising they got an unqualified advisor. Do you come across this much? I'm not sure how big this problem is, but it seems to be growing. Is it something you come across much?
No, not seen that at all. I really haven't. So I'm not sure how big an issue that is. I know that it may be slightly prevalent as well in the law with the use of Mackenzie Friends, that non-legally qualified people that would act as a Mackenzie Friend for a fee. Not aware of it, not come across it in your profession yet.
Okay. And the other thing that seems to be we're moving towards at the moment very much is blockchain. Now, under blockchain, invoices will be sent automatically. They'll automatically go onto a person's accounts. Everybody will know everything that's going on. Your accounts will automatically, I mean, if you look at some of the videos that have been prepared by some of the software companies at the moment, on day 29, that money will be extracted from your account, whether you've got it or not, etc. Yeah. I mean, I can see this being a big problem. I don't know about yourself. If it takes away that flexibility, might it bring more people into trouble more quickly?
I think technology has some wonderful advantages, but I am slightly skeptical about the technology that promises to deliver everything seamlessly. Yeah, I think there must be flexibility in the system. You can understand it from a government point of view, where tax is deducted immediately, and you don't have the revenue then as the unwilling creditor that has no ability to participate. Yeah, I can understand why government might want it, but businesses ultimately, they're not all machines run on that basis. There needs to be flexibility.
Yeah, we had Bill Dodwell on quite early on in this. We set this up virtually straight, within hours of being locked down. Bill Dodwell, who looks after the government's tax simplification unit, and he was just saying that this might be a good excuse for simplifying tax. I think, if anything, life's actually been made more difficult with all of the grants and the loans and all this stuff now that's coming out. So perhaps he didn't get his wish this time. So Bill, if you are listening by any chance, you might like to come on sometime and tell us, what's it looking like so far.
Sorry, you're saying simplifying. I just wanted to bring up the question of the bounce back loan, and you guys may well be engaged in advising on the use of the bounce back loan. There's been some interesting advice from various quarters about the use of a bounce back loan. The idea of it to be that it's a loan that gets you through a period of time. So you use it for your heating, your lighting, you're paying your rent, you're paying your wages and restocking going forward. What it is not to be used for is the purchase of a new Ferrari, a buy-to-let property, replacing borrowing where you have a personal guarantee for a loan where you don't now have a personal guarantee. And also, of course, you can't take it as dividends because it's a loan, it's not profit. Now, in the usual scheme of things, that's not going to be not going to be a problem for the business, because the business will continue. Next year, it'll start paying its loan back. It'll go off into the distance and never be a problem. Where that becomes an issue for your clients potentially is if they don't make it through this period and the company becomes insolvent and a liquidator looks at the bounce back loan and what it has been used for. I wrote an article called "The Bouncing Bomb of the Bounce Back Loan," and I think there are potentially some really serious issues for company directors who have misused the bounce back loan, and the company has subsequently gone into liquidation.
Can we get a look at some of these articles? I mean, that particular one sounds of interest to us. I mean, we have a very thirsty audience for such things. We can find it. Is this, you know?
Well, we got a number of resources. Richard has launched a website called businesssupport.co.uk, and all our articles are on there. And then everything that Richard and I write also appear on our LinkedIn pages, which are also terrific reads. So you can find Richard at Richard Sims on LinkedIn, and me at Steve Thatcher.
Oh, okay, that's great. I've been asking you all the questions, but obviously you've come on here very kindly today in Richard's absence. But I have to say you've been good for your money, as we didn't pay, so that's always good. Is there anything else that you want to leave as your parting savvy, as it were?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. I think I've really enjoyed talking to you and those that have listened in to us. Yeah, the one takeaway from this is just don't be afraid to have that conversation. You've already got the director's ear. He already trusts you. Just trust your own instinct. And if you see something within the books and records, within the business that just doesn't feel right, don't leave it too long. Broach the conversation, and don't be afraid to pick up the phone. You know, it doesn't cost anything to talk to us. And it doesn't mean that the business is going to go into an insolvency process. But what it may mean is that we can help you make, and your director clients make decisions in their interest that will benefit them now and not see a problem in 9 months' time.
Great. Ali just says, can we email the links to you? Yes, we'll sort that out when we've come down. And Heather Palmer says, excellent webinar. Thank you, ICB and FA Sims. Thank you, Heather. And she did, meanwhile, send me something just to say, it was a very gentle dig when I say she was having a dig at me. But the thing that I'm finding out with a live webinar on, you know, as often as we're doing one, is that thinking on your feet or sitting down actually, but thinking and speaking off the cuff, I can see how people can get themselves into trouble quite easily. So,
oh golly, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So thank you very much for coming along. Yeah, we will continue to work with FA Sims. You know, we have our moments with them, and then we disappear, and then we come back again. So yeah, there's a lot to talk about. I'd like to link into some of the stuff that you're doing, and it was very nice to talk to you, and it's good to see, as I say, somebody with a smile on the face. You know, if you're going to go to a funeral director, you want one that looks happy, not that looks as sad as you feel. So
lovely.
Very much
thank you, Gary. I look forward to meeting you in the flesh at your next conference, whenever that might be. Yeah,
we're doing one in November. It really looks as if it's not going to be anything other than a virtual conference at the moment, but it is going to be a big virtual conference. And I mean, these webinars each day pick up different audiences, you know, some big, some small, but, you know, up to 7,000, which is the biggest we've had, 7,200. And we're getting to far more members than we did before. So, yeah, you know, more people are going to branch meetings and everything else. It's so much easier for them just to sit at home and say, oh yeah, I must switch on for an hour. But
absolutely, yeah.
But we look forward to have you there virtually or physically or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely, in spirit at some point.
And it's good to see you. Thank you, everybody, for listening. See you on Friday for Thankfully It's Friday. And meanwhile, bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.